Single mom helps starving elder. Hours later, the CEO appears and says, "That's my father." Touched by kindness, he suddenly falls for her. The wind sliced through the early morning air, sharp and bitter, with flurries of snow sweeping across the quiet streets of the small northern town. Emily Parker pulled her coat tighter around her thin frame, one hand gripping the scarf at her neck, the other holding the small fingers of her 4-year-old son Liam. The snow crunched beneath their worn boots as they trudged down the narrow sidewalk, their breath visible in short puffs. They were both shivering. "I'm cold, Mommy," Liam whispered, his cheeks flushed red. "I know, sweetheart. We're almost there," she said gently, squeezing his hand. Her voice was soft but tired. The preschool was 4 blocks from the drafty old duplex they called home. Its windows leaked, the plumbing groaned, and the heater wheezed more than it warmed, but it was all they had. Emily worked mornings at a roadside diner and afternoons cleaning houses. Every step she took through the snow was carried by quiet strength. After dropping Liam off with a kiss and a hug, she turned and made her way toward the diner, pulling her knit hat lower over her ears. Most storefronts were dark and the streets were nearly empty. Only those who had no choice ventured out in weather like this. Then she saw him. At first, he looked like just a pile of snow near the bus shelter. But as she drew closer, she saw it was a man, an old man barefoot, his socks soaked and clinging to thin ankles. His coat hung off his shoulders, unbuttoned and far too big, as he stood there trembling and lost. His lips moved almost too softly to hear. Emily slowed her pace, listening. "Today is his birthday," the man murmured. "He's 6 today. I have to find him. I promised him cake." She looked around. No one else stopped. A car passed by, and a woman walked her dog across the street, but Emily was the only one to step forward. "Sir," she asked gently, "are you all right?" The old man blinked as if noticing her for the first time. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. "Mr. Hayes," he asked, "he asked me for cake white frosting. I told him no. I said no." His voice broke, and he hugged himself tighter against the cold. Emily reached out and touched his arm. His skin was like ice. "Please," she said softly, "come with me. You're freezing." Without waiting for an answer, she gently guided him down the street. The diner was just ahead. She led him inside, ignoring the curious glances from the few customers and the cook behind the counter. She took him to the booth nearest the heater, then went to the counter. "Tracy, can I get a bowl of oatmeal, some toast, and hot coffee? I'll pay." "Emily, you don't have to." "I want to," she said. When she returned to the booth, the man was still murmuring, "He said he'd wait. I was busy. Too busy." She slid into the seat across from him. "What's your name?" He blinked slowly. "Walter. Walter Blake." He smiled gently. "Hi, Walter. I'm Emily." He didn't respond. His hands trembled as he reached for the coffee. He took a sip, then another, as if the heat reminded him he was still there. He turned to the window, watching snowflakes collect on the glass. "I should have gone," he whispered. "I should have just brought the cake. He begged me, she begged me, and I said no." His shoulders trembled. Emily leaned in slightly, her heart aching. His voice dropped to barely a breath. "She took him to get the cake in the truck. I killed her. I killed her because I said no." Emily sat frozen. She didn't know who she was or what cake he meant, but she didn't need the details. She knew grief when she saw it. He looked so broken, so lost. A man still trapped in a moment the world had long since left behind. She reached across the table, picked up a napkin, and gently placed it in his hand, keeping hers there for a moment longer. "You're safe now, Walter," she said quietly. "I'm here." For just a second his eyes cleared. He looked at her, not through her, and gave a tiny grateful nod. Outside the snow kept falling, but inside that booth a flicker of warmth had returned. The bell above the diner door jingled as a gust of cold wind swept through. Emily looked up just as a tall man stepped inside, snow-dusting his dark coat and hair. He had a sharp, commanding presence, someone used to boardrooms, not roadside diners. Nathaniel Blake had not slept in 2 days. The alert from the tracking device in his father's old hearing aid had led him to this small, unfamiliar town. He had followed it like a lifeline, praying he was not too late. The moment he stepped in, his eyes locked on the booth near the heater. His body tensed. His father alive sat next to a young blonde woman, and she was feeding him. At first, Nathaniel's instincts screamed that something was wrong, that the stranger might be taking advantage of his father. He moved forward, ready to intervene, but then he stopped. What he saw wasn't exploitation. He saw kindness. The woman, Emily, was lifting a spoonful of oatmeal toward Walter's mouth, her other hand steadying his shoulder. There was no impatience in her face, only care. Nathaniel froze. His breath caught his chest tight, not just with relief, but with something else, something tender, aching, unfamiliar. Emily noticed him. Then their eyes met. Walter looked up, beaming. "There he is, my son. It's his birthday today, 6 years old. You want cake, don't you? Let me go get it." Nathaniel's face fell. Emily looked from Walter to Nathaniel, slowly understanding. "You're his son." Nathaniel nodded. "Yes, I am Nathaniel." Emily stepped aside, letting him take her seat. He knelt beside his father and gently placed his hand over Walter's. "Hi, Dad," he said softly. Walter smiled like a child seeing a magician. "I told you I'd find him," he whispered proudly to Emily. Emily gave a soft smile and quietly walked to the counter, giving them space. Later, as Walter dozed in the booth, Emily returned with fresh coffee and sat across from Nathaniel. "I owe you a real thank you," he said. "You helped him when no one else did. That means more than I can say." Emily shook her head. "I couldn't just leave him." A pause. Nathaniel stared into his cup. "He wasn't always like this. He was brilliant. My mother adored him. But things changed." Emily stayed quiet, listening. "I turned 6 on a Friday. I wanted a cake. Just a little one. Dad said he was too busy. Always too busy. I cried. Begged my mom to take me." He paused, his voice cracking. "There was snow like today. A truck ran a light. I woke up in the hospital. She didn't." Emily's lips parted, but she said nothing. "Dad changed after that," he went on. "He never said it, but I think he blamed himself or me. Either way, we never celebrated birthdays again." Emily looked over at Walter, who was softly snoring. "I think he's been celebrating it ever since in his mind." Nathaniel nodded, his eyes glassy. "I haven't cried in years," he said. Emily rose quietly and went to the kitchen. A few minutes later, she returned with a small plate, a slice of chocolate cake left over from the day before, with a tiny candle flickering on top. She placed it in front of him, her voice gentle. "Happy birthday." Walter stirred, his eyes lighting up. "Cake!" he shouted. "Sing the song." He clapped out of rhythm, out of time, but full of joy. Emily chuckled, and a couple of customers joined in with soft laughter. Nathaniel sat frozen, then abruptly stood and walked away toward the bathroom. Emily's smile faded. Had she done something wrong? But when he returned, his eyes were red. She opened her mouth to apologize. He raised a hand. "No, don't," he said, his voice rough. "You didn't do anything wrong." He looked at the candle. "You gave me something I didn't know I needed. A moment I never had. Thank you for that." After the cake and coffee, after Walter's strange birthday song and Nathaniel's quiet tears, the air in the diner grew still again. Walter had dozed off in the booth, his head resting lightly against the frosted window. His breathing was soft but uneven. Nathaniel watched him in silence, then turned to Emily. "Thank you again," he said, his voice low. "Really?" Emily nodded. "He shouldn't be outside alone in this weather. Do you live nearby?" Nathaniel hesitated, then glanced out the window at the falling snow. "I don't. He's supposed to be in a care home about an hour from here. They called this morning when they found his bed empty. He must have wandered off last night." Emily frowned. "In this cold?" Nathaniel nodded grimly. "I've spoken with the director. He'll be moved to a more secure facility by next week, but for now, I was going to take him back today." As if hearing the conversation, Walter stirred. His eyes opened hazy but aware, and he turned to Nathaniel. "No," he murmured, then weakly gripped Emily's wrist. "Don't take me back, please. I want to stay with her. She's kind." Emily looked down, surprised by the intensity in the old man's grip. Nathaniel stood motionless, watching the desperation on his father's face. "I'm not taking him far," Nathaniel said gently, kneeling down. "Just back to the facility for a few more days. Then I'll place him somewhere better." Walter didn't let go. Emily glanced at Nathaniel, then quietly said, "He can stay with me tonight. My place isn't much, but it's warm. I'll make sure he eats. You can check on him whenever." Nathaniel looked conflicted, torn between reason and the pleading look in his father's eyes. Finally, he gave a slow nod. "All right," he said, "just for tonight." Emily lived in a small duplex at the edge of town, one of the older ones that creaked when the wind blew. The wallpaper was peeling and the floor groaned with every step, but it was clean and full of life. Liam's crayon drawings on the fridge, a chipped couch, the faint scent of lavender from a candle on the kitchen shelf, these filled the small home. Walter took the old recliner near the window and seemed to relax. Liam, still home from preschool due to snow closures, peeked shyly from behind a blanket. "Is he our grandpa?" he asked in a whisper. Emily smiled. "He's a friend, sweetheart. His name is Mr. Walter." Liam patted over in his socks, looked up at the old man and said seriously, "I can show you my dinosaurs if you want." Walter chuckled softly and nodded. Nathaniel stood by the door, almost too tall for the small entryway. "Are you sure this is okay?" Emily nodded. "I've had tougher days." He hesitated. "There's a motel 2 blocks from here. I'll stay nearby for a few nights." Emily smiled faintly. "Suit yourself." That evening, Nathaniel returned just as Emily was finishing dinner, a simple stew, nothing fancy, but warm and hearty. Walter was laughing quietly with Liam, who was explaining which dinosaurs were meat-eaters. At the table, Nathaniel sat stiffly, at first unsure where to put his hands. Emily set a bowl in front of him and said gently, "Eat before it gets cold." Something in him softened. For the first time in years, he sat not in a meeting, not at a formal dinner, but at a real kitchen table. He ate slowly, listening more than speaking, watching his father laugh, watching Emily fuss with the cracked salt shaker, watching how everything felt normal. After dinner, Emily rinsed dishes. Nathaniel, without a word, took the towel from her hands and started drying. "You don't have to do that," she said, surprised. "I know." Later, he adjusted the crooked lamp in the living room, fixed the back door handle, and replaced the broken light bulb over the sink. Nothing big, nothing flashy, but Emily noticed every quiet gesture. That night, as she tucked Liam into bed and heard him whisper, "Mommy, I like Mr. Nate," she felt something stir in her chest. Not love, not yet, but something small and warm and honest. And for the first time in a long time, Emily let it stay. The night was still blanketed in soft falling snow that shimmered under the porch light. Emily sat on the front steps wrapped in an old woolen blanket, her breath curling into the cold like smoke. Nathaniel sat beside her, elbows on his knees, his eyes distant. Inside, through the frosted window, the sound of Liam's laughter floated out. Walter sat on the floor helping the little boy with a puzzle. Both were lost in the moment, untouched by the cold outside. Emily glanced at Nathaniel. "Do you ever think about your mother?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. His breath rose in a long, slow cloud. "Every day," he said finally. "But I've never forgiven myself." "For the cake?" She waited. "I begged for it," he said. "A birthday cake, just one. Dad said he was too busy, always too busy. I threw a fit. Mom gave in. She always did." He paused, his jaw clenched. "There was snow like today. A truck ran a light. I woke up in the hospital. She didn't." Emily's heart ached for the boy he had been and for the man who still carried that guilt like a second skin. "Your father never talked about it." Nathaniel shook his head. He never said her name again. He didn't blame me, but he didn't need to. He just shut down, took care of me like a nurse, distant, efficient, cold. Emily looked toward the window again. Walter was laughing at something Liam said. Maybe he loved you so much he didn't know how to show it. Or maybe he was just scared he'd lose you too. Nathaniel didn't reply, but his shoulders dropped slightly as if her words had reached a quiet place inside him. A gust of wind swept the porch. Emily tugged the blanket closer. Nathaniel stood, brushed snow from his coat. "I'll be back," he murmured, and stepped inside. Later in the dim kitchen, while making tea, Nathaniel noticed a photo tucked behind a stack of bills. He picked it up. Emily stood in the picture wearing a simple white wedding dress, one hand resting on her swollen belly. "That was the happiest and loneliest day of my life," she said from behind. He turned. She leaned in the doorway, arms folded. "We got married because I was pregnant. Thought it was the right thing to do. But being right doesn't always mean being happy." Nathaniel nodded. "What happened?" She laughed. "Said he wasn't ready. I knew it the day I said I do." Her smile was tired, but without bitterness. He set the photo back down carefully. "At least," she said, looking toward the living room, "we got the best part of it." He followed her gaze. Liam was asleep on Walter's lap, the two of them curled up like an old soul and new life. "We still have the kids," she said softly. Nathaniel looked at her and smiled. Not the polished smile of a CEO, but something quiet, honest. That night, after the house went still, he stayed up. The kitchen was cold, but he worked silently. He tightened the leaking pipe under the sink, fixed the squeaky cabinet, then turned to the stove, removing rusted parts, cleaning them gently, and replacing what he could from a box of tools in his car. By dawn, the kitchen smelled faintly of metal and warmth. He wiped his hands and left a note on the fridge pinned by a dinosaur magnet. Emily wandered in, half asleep, her feet cold against the linoleum. She paused. The kitchen felt different. She saw the note. "This stove is strong enough to bake a birthday cake now, whenever you're ready." She stood holding the note, unmoving. For the first time since he'd entered her life, Emily looked at Nathaniel not with caution or distance, but with something softer, something open, something like the beginning of trust. The town was beginning to glow. Christmas lights shimmered along rooftops and snow-dusted trees. Storefronts were wrapped in garlands and fake icicles. Laughter echoed down narrow streets. It was the season of warmth, wonder, and whispered wishes. Emily was helping Liam button his coat when he tugged on her sleeve. "Can I write my letter to Santa today?" he asked. She smiled. "Of course, sweetheart." He pulled a crumpled paper from his backpack, sat at the kitchen table, and began writing. Emily peeked over his shoulder but said nothing. 10 minutes later, he curled up next to her. Later, as she cleared the table, she noticed the letter by the cookie crumbs. She picked it up. "Dear Santa, I only want one thing this year. Please, can I have a real family with a dad and everything? I've been really good. Love, Liam." Emily froze. Nathaniel found her standing in the living room, the letter clutched to her chest. She handed it to him wordlessly. He read it, and for the first time in years, Nathaniel Blake felt like a 6-year-old again, longing for something simple, impossible, and achingly beautiful. The next day, he asked if they could go shopping together. They bundled up and walked into town, the three of them, like any little family. Liam squealed when they picked out a crooked pine tree. He loved it instantly. Back home, they dug out a shoebox of old ornaments. Most were chipped or mismatched, but Liam hung each one with care. Emily laughed when he clustered all the red ones on a single branch. Nathaniel reached into his coat and unwrapped a red glass ornament. "My mom bought this our first Christmas together," he said. "I've kept it all these years." He handed it to Liam, who held it carefully. Together they placed it near the top of the tree. Later that week, with snow piling outside, Walter was more lucid than he'd been in days. Sitting near the fire, he watched Nathaniel and Liam build a Lego train set. "You're a good man," Walter said suddenly, his voice clearer than usual. Nathaniel looked up, surprised. Walter smiled faintly. "You didn't get that from me. She gave it back to you." Nathaniel moved beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You did your best," he whispered. Walter's grip tightened. "Don't lose her." That night, Nathaniel sat with Liam at the table, laptop open. He showed him how to code simple commands, colors, sounds. Liam was enthralled. Emily leaned in the doorway, watching. Her heart swelled. She hadn't dared to dream this, her son laughing, the house filled with light. Something inside her was healing. A few nights later, a storm knocked out the power. The heater groaned, then fell silent. The house dimmed. Emily lit candles around the room, their flicker casting a golden glow. She made cocoa on the stove, while Liam and Walter bundled under blankets. Nathaniel sat beside her on the floor, leaning against the couch. He reached for her hand. She let him take it, then slowly pulled away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm just scared." He waited. "I've built walls," she said, "because every time something beautiful enters my life, it disappears." Nathaniel looked at their hands, now resting apart. "I understand," he said quietly. The next morning, Emily woke to soft thuds outside. She pulled back the curtain and saw Nathaniel bundled in his coat, hammering something together in the backyard. By noon, she stepped into the snow and stood in front of the old shed, now transformed. Inside was a tiny stove, a shelf of Liam's favorite books, a beanbag, and on the wall a photo of the three of them decorating the tree. Emily stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. Nathaniel looked up from where he was placing a lantern on the shelf. "You built this?" she asked softly. He nodded. "For Liam," he said, "but also for you." She stepped inside. Snowflakes clung to her scarf, her eyes filled. "You don't need to say I love you," she murmured. "You already did." And in the quiet of that small wooden room, something wordless held them warm, real, and beginning to grow. The sky hung low that morning, heavy with the promise of snow. But the storm that arrived first wasn't made of wind or weather. It wore heels and perfume and carried a leather handbag worth more than Emily's monthly rent. Vanessa stepped into the cafe like she owned it. Her coat a sleek cut of winter white, her lipstick the color of wine heads turned, but her eyes were fixed only on one person, Emily. Emily had just finished refilling the sugar jars when she noticed the woman approaching her booth. "You must be Emily," Vanessa said, sliding into the seat across from her without invitation. Emily blinked. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "No," Vanessa said, removing her gloves with deliberate grace. "But I know Nathaniel." Emily froze for a moment, then slowly sat down. "I'm his ex," Vanessa continued, offering a smile that held no warmth. "We were together for 4 years. He didn't tell you, did he?" Emily kept her voice steady. "He mentioned someone. He didn't say much." Vanessa leaned in, her eyes sharp. "I just wanted to see for myself. The woman he's been hiding away in some little snow-covered town." Emily said nothing. "I understand the appeal," Vanessa went on. "You're quaint, sweet a story he can tell himself for a while, but let's not forget who he is." Emily's jaw tensed. "He's a CEO," Vanessa said softly. "Not a stand-in father, not some small-town fairy tale hero. You do know the difference between a dream and reality, right?" The words landed like cold stones in Emily's chest. She stood up without replying. That afternoon, Nathaniel received a call that pulled him back to the city. A major investor was threatening to pull out. His team was panicking. He packed his bag reluctantly, promising to be back in 2 days. He never saw Vanessa. He never knew she had come. Emily did not tell him. She stood in the doorway as he left, Liam waving from behind her. Nathaniel leaned down to the little boy. "I'll be back before you know it." Liam frowned. "You promise?" Nathaniel smiled, ruffling his hair. "I promise." But promises, like snowflakes, often melt too quickly. That night, Walter began coughing. His fever spiked. Emily called the clinic, bundled him in blankets, and sat beside him in the dim light of the living room, wiping his forehead. Liam curled beside her, sleepy and confused. "Is Mr. Walter going to be okay, Mommy?" "I hope so, sweetheart. Did Mr. Nate leave because of us?" Emily paused. "No," she lied. "He just has work." But in her heart doubt had already crept in, its fingers cold and sharp. Vanessa's words echoed louder in the silence Nathaniel had left behind. She didn't cry, but she didn't sleep either. The next day Walter drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling things Emily didn't understand, names, dates, phrases from a world-long past. As snow began falling again outside, he opened his eyes and looked at Emily. "Anna," he whispered. Emily froze. His voice was so tender, so broken. He reached for her hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have come home sooner. I should have bought the cake." She swallowed hard, tears threatening behind her eyes. "You were just trying to help," she whispered. He gripped her hand tighter. "Don't let him grow up cold. Don't let him forget how to feel." Emily couldn't hold it in anymore. She lowered her head beside his hand and wept quietly, not just for the man before her, but for the boy he once raised and the man who had walked away carrying too much silence. The room was still. The tree lights blinked softly in the corner. Liam slept on the couch with a blanket pulled to his chin. And Emily sat in the glow of a Christmas that suddenly felt very far away, her heart full of a pain she could neither name nor deny. The snow hadn't stopped falling. It blanketed the streets, rooftops, and trees, muffling the world into silence. Nathaniel stepped out of the car, his coat already dusted with white. The town looked smaller than he remembered. But it wasn't the town he had come back for. He climbed the porch steps of Emily's home, his heart pounding harder than expected. He knocked once, then again. No answer. The curtains were drawn and lights were dim inside. After a pause, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it gently into the crack of the door. "I lost my mother. Then I almost lost my father. I can't lose the family I just found. Not when it's you and Liam." He didn't wait, walking down the snowy path, unsure if the letter would be read or if he could be forgiven for the silence, the absence, and the bad timing that never seemed to be on his side. That night, Emily found the letter. She read it in the kitchen, her hands trembling. She read it twice, then held it to her chest, her eyes staring into the dark beyond the frosted window. The next morning, the world was bathed in white. Sunlight danced on the snow like crushed glass. When Emily opened the door to take out the trash, she stopped. Liam was in the yard, bundled in his blue coat and red mittens, rolling a giant snowball. Next to him, also gloved and capped, was Nathaniel. He was laughing genuinely as the snowball collapsed and they started again. Emily stood on the porch, one hand gripping the door frame. Liam looked up. "Mommy, look, we're building a snowman. His name is Hope." Nathaniel looked up too. He didn't speak, just watched her waiting. She stepped down the stairs slowly. When her boots touched the snow, Nathaniel moved toward her, not fast, not hesitant, just enough to close the space. He didn't ask if she was angry. He didn't explain where he had been. He simply wrapped her in his arms, and Emily let him, not forever, just long enough to say without words that maybe this wasn't over. Later that week, Nathaniel invited her and Liam to the city. "Just for the day," he said. "Just something small." Emily hesitated, but Liam was already cheering for the train ride and the adventure. The company lobby was glowing with Christmas lights. A soft piano played. A small stage stood in the center, decorated with garlands. Emily stood off to the side, holding Liam's hand, unsure why they were there. Then Nathaniel stepped onto the stage. He wore a suit, sharp-tailored, but there was something softer in how he carried himself, now something more real. He looked out at the room, cleared his throat, and began. "This year taught me things about time, about regret, about the quiet power of kindness." He paused, his eyes drifting toward Emily. "There was a moment this winter when I found something I didn't know I'd lost. A connection I thought was gone for good." The room quieted. Cameras clicked. I'm not here to talk about performance or growth today. I want to thank someone." He turned slightly. "A woman who showed me what strength really looks like. Who reminded me that healing isn't loud, it's patient, gentle, unshakably kind." Emily's eyes began to sting. She and her son taught me that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the hand that finds yours in a storm. It's the voice that says, "You can start again." Then Nathaniel stepped off the stage. He walked straight to her. He held out his hand, and in front of 100 strangers and 1,000 tiny lights, Emily reached out and took it. The snow was falling gently, the way it had on that first morning, soft, silent, steady. It blanketed the sidewalks, clung to tree branches, and made the world look clean, as if it too was ready for something new. Nathaniel parked the car by the old bus stop, the same one where weeks ago Emily had found a man with no shoes, no name, and a heart full of sorrow. Now Walter sat in a wheelchair bundled in a thick coat, a scarf around his neck, his hands resting lightly on a wool blanket across his lap. His breathing was slower these days, his voice softer, but his eyes still held flickers of clarity, especially today. Emily stood beside him, one hand on the handle of the chair. Liam clung to her other side, his eyes wide, his cheeks pink from the cold. Nathaniel stepped forward, carrying a small cake box, the kind with a clear window that fogged with the warmth inside. He knelt before Walter and opened it carefully. Inside was a simple chocolate cake with white frosting. No writing, just a single red candle standing tall in the center. Nathaniel placed it on the bench beside the wheelchair. "I brought the cake, Dad," he said softly. "I finally brought it." Walter looked at it, his eyes glistening, and then up at his son. Nathaniel's voice cracked. "I have the cake and I have you. And today I want one more thing." He turned to Emily. She was watching him, her eyes already brimming. Nathaniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. No crowd, no stage, just snow and silence. He lowered himself onto one knee. "It's not your birthday, it's not mine. But I think today is the day we start over. Not pretending, not wishing, just living together." He opened the box to reveal a modest but beautiful ring, the band simple, the diamond, small but clear and full of light. Emily covered her mouth, her breath catching in her throat. Nathaniel looked up at her, his voice softer now. "I'm not promising perfection. I'm promising presence. I'm promising to show up for you. For Liam, for us." Emily didn't speak. She couldn't. She nodded, her eyes shining, her heart full. Liam let out a joyful squeal and threw his arms around them both. Nathaniel wrapped one arm around the boy, the other around the woman he had once thought he would never deserve. Walter chuckled, his voice a soft rasp. "Best cake I've ever had," he murmured. "Took you long enough, son." Nathaniel smiled through tears and reached for his father's hand. They sat there for a long time, 3 generations. 3 hearts bound, not by blood alone, but by forgiveness, grace, and something stronger than time. The snow kept falling, but it no longer felt cold. It felt like a blessing. No big wedding followed, no grand celebration. Just the steady, quiet joy of 3 people standing together in a world that for the first time felt whole. And in the hush of that wintry morning beneath the gray sky and drifting flakes, something changed, not in the world around them, but in the hearts that now beat beside one another. Their newfound bond strong as an oath, and the snow fell on their shoulders, on their hair, on the cake that sat quietly on the bench. And for once it did not bury the past, but gently embraced it, letting it rest. If this story moved you even a little, take a breath and feel the quiet magic of kindness, forgiveness, and second chances. Sometimes it's not big moments, but small, steady love that builds a family. If you believe in stories that heal and remind us what truly matters, then welcome to the Soul-Stirring Stories family. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that hype button to support the channel. Until next time, stay warm, stay kind, and keep believing in the beauty of starting over. Soul-Stirring Stories, where every story touches a soul.